Alrighty, so it's time to talk about DC United and do their season preview. And just like Columbus, DC United had an amazing offseason where they definitely added some of the most important pieces during this offseason. And if I would have done a rankings of talking about who exactly won this offseason and who had the best offseason this year, I would definitely put DC United very high up the list. Now, last season, they finished with a record of 13, 11, and 10, and they finished the season with 50 points. They only scored 42 goals last season, which, as I mentioned before, one of the biggest problems for DC last season was goal scoring. And it's shocking the fact that goal scoring was the biggest problem, consider they had an elite attacking core in the likes of Lucio Acosta, Lucas Rodriguez, and Wayne Rooney, and you would think that kind of attacking threat would at least score more than 42 goals that they registered last season, but apparently that is not the case. But they only conceded 38 goals last season, and I think the reason why they actually made it to the playoffs last season is because they only conceded 38 goals, and that they were actually the best defensive team in the Eastern Conference, and only LAFC have conceded less goals than any other team besides DC United, and that there was a time when they had tons of nil-nil draws, which kind of adds up in terms of the total draw number that they had, which they had a lot of draws last season, but at least it did get them over the line and did get them to the playoffs. But yeah, it was definitely a very hard grinding row, and something that I don't think a lot of DC fans thought that this team was going to, or that team was going to be heading into last season. And they also finished the season with a goal differential of +4. By the way, the reason why it's a red mark here is just I was about to hit the record button, I realized I accidentally put -4 here, and I also put they finished 4th in the Eastern Conference, which is not true. They actually finished 5th in the Eastern Conference and had to play against TFC in the knockout round, which they lost that game. And it was definitely one of the most memorable game, but definitely not for DC United fans to remember, because that was the game when they score a late equalizer in stoppage time to send it into extra time, and just as you thought they had all the momentum heading into extra time, they just completely fall apart in extra time, and they basically did one, if not the biggest collapse I've ever seen a team in extra time, where they conceded 4 goals in extra time to lose 5-1 in extra time. Like, to this day, I still cannot believe how in the world the DC, who looked like he had all the momentum heading into extra time, just conceded 4 goals and just completely capitulate like they did in the extra time period. And I have a feeling it's going to be, right now I think the record, of course, for the most goals score in extra time is going to be belong to TFC, with them beating DC United 5-1 and scoring those 4 goals, and it's going to take a lot to break that record. But seriously, I mean, it's kind of surprising how that, of course, would happen, and that's really one of the first time, not only in MLS history, but of all my time watching soccer, I've never seen a team just fall apart like that and just conceded that many goals in extra time. And what also makes it even more amazing is that I remember those 4 goals that DC conceded was in the first half of extra time. So they basically conceded 4 goals in the first 15 minutes of extra time. Talk about just a complete capitulation to this team. But obviously, I'm not going to really twist the knife that much to DC because, I think they probably move on from that, and that they hope that it won't happen again, and that they can maybe go deeper this season. I mean, this season, as I mentioned, when you look at the addition that they made and the roster that they have this season, you would think they should be making more further than the first rounds that they have failed to do for the past couple of years, but we shall see how that's gonna do. And again, they got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs by TFC, and they also got knocked out in the round of 16 of the U.S. Open Cup. Now, in terms of players that is in for this team, as I mentioned, with some of these good acquisition, they bought back Yamil Assad after they decided to not sign him on a permanent deal a couple of years ago, but now they finally signed him on a permanent deal. They signed homegrown Moses Neiman. Bill Hamid, I know what you're probably thinking, why is he part of the Endless if he was with this team last season? Well, the reason why he's part of the Endless is that this offseason was when DC United made Bill Hamid deal on a permanent, which is kind of weird because 2 years ago when DC let go of Bill Hamid and let go of him to join FC Midtjylland in Denmark, just I think 6 months after he's with FC Midtjylland, he actually went back to DC United on a loan deal, and that this offseason is when they kind of bought him back and made his deal permanent again at DC United. So it was kind of a very awkward situation that Bill Hamid has been in, and that it almost felt like he was trying to play in Europe and trying to fulfill his dream to do well in Europe, and it did not work out whatsoever. And now he's back with DC United, which I think DC United is going to be pretty much his home from now on. And that when you look at what Bill Hamid has done with this team, I have a feeling if he can continue to perform like what he has been doing with DC, he could really be a legend of this team. They of course got Edison Flores, which by far is the biggest acquisition that they made and one of the biggest acquisition of this offseason. I believe they got him for around $6 to $7 million from Monarcas Morela in Liga MX. Then they got Kevin Paredes, and they were also involved in the most surprising offseason acquisition this offseason by getting Julian Gresso from Atlanta United. Like, to this day, I'm still kind of shocked the fact that Gresso is no longer with Atlanta. And, you know, when I think of Julian Gresso and eventually he was going to move on to Atlanta, I would think that Atlanta was going to sell him off to Europe. I definitely did not think in any shape or form that Julian Gresso would be sold off to another club, and that other club will be a team in MLS, and it's in the same conference as Atlanta in DC United. So yeah, this is a massive signing for DC, of course, to improve their attack, and it's going to be interesting to see how they are going to use, because Julian Gresso, he is always known as one of the most versatile player in this league, so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if DC are going to put him on the wing, midfield, or even put him in the fullback position. Now, in terms of players that is out for DC, we got Antonio Bustamante, Marquinhos Rezo, Wayne Rooney, Leandro Jara, Lucho Acosta, and Lucas Rodriguez. And basically, most of these guys that is out are either guys that you probably have never heard of them before, because they're usually our bench warmer, or guys that is part of the old attacking core in Wayne Rooney, Lucho Acosta, and Lucas Rodriguez. And now they basically got replaced with the like of Julian Gresso, Yamil Assad, Paul Ariola, and also Edison Flores in those spots. Now, in terms of the goal scored for DC United, I'm going to say Ola Kamara and Edison Flores. I mean, you know, I know for a fact that there's been a lot of question whether or not if Kamara can basically be the goal scorer that be the lethal goal scorer that he was a couple of years ago and fill in the shoes that Wayne Rooney is in. For me, absolutely he could be. I mean, he's been proven time and time again wherever he does go to a club in MLS, he can definitely be a decent goal scorer, and he can guarantee to score 10 plus goals for your club. And I also put Edison Flores there because besides the fact that Edison Flores is an amazing playmaker, and I really think he's going to be one of the one of the best playmaker in this league, he can also be a goal scorer of this team. So that's why I am going to put him there as one of the goals scored for this team. Playmaker, I put 4 names on there because let's face it, when you look at this DC team, it is really hard to choose who I think is really gonna be the playmaker. Like some people will say Edison Flores because it's pretty obvious that he's playing in the spot that is going to be the guy that is going to be playing the playmaker role. But you could argue Julian Gresso could be the playmaker because he led the team, or he led Atlanta in terms of assists last season. You could also say Yamil Assad, when he was on his first stint at DC, had some decent assists with this team. And you can also say Paul Arriola too, who is also a guy that has bring in some assists to this team last season and could be the playmaker of this team. So yeah, it's hard to decide who is going to be the playmaker, and this also just shows you how dangerous this DC attack is, and how, last season they clearly saw that attack was one of the biggest weakness, and that they felt like some of the playmaker that they had, which they thought Lucho Acosta was going to be the playmaker of this team, didn't quite work out. Now they of course brought in some reinforcement that they think could definitely be much better than the old horde of playmakers that they had in last season team. MVP on this team, I'm gonna say Edison Flores because again, I think he is going to really be the guy that is not only going to be the goal scorer but also be the playmaker. But you could also make a case for all these other guys that I mentioned as playmaker, and even make a case for Ola Kamara, who could, if he does score like 15 or 20 goals, he could also be the MVP. And let's also not forget the defense too. Like I think, as much as I know a lot of people have talked about the attack and a lot of people are excited what this DC attack is going to bring, let's not forget about the back line too, with the likes of Steven Bergbaum, Frederick Brilliant, and all those guys in the back line. Like this team, as I said, last season they finished first in terms of defending in the Eastern Conference, and only LAFC have conceded less goals than DC has. So, you gotta also give them props in terms of the fact that I think they could do the same thing this season, and that if they could be just as good as they did in the last offseason, you can even throw some of those names at the back line to be the MVP of this team. And in terms of the surprise package, I'm going to say Donovan Pines, and I really think this is a guy that is an upcoming star for this team, and that this is kind of a guy that I think a couple of years ago we were talking about, a guy named Russell Canals, who has really become one of the most promising and one of the highest potential holding midfielder and central defensive mid in the league. And the reason why I didn't put Russell Canals as a surprise package is because we knew that was the case. But a couple of years ago, I would have put Russell Canals in that list because I really like the way that he plays. And now I'm going to basically say Donovan Pines could be something that Russell Canals was a couple of years ago, where a lot of people was seeing the potential that he can reach. And there's no doubt that Pines, I know he's not going to be a regular starter of this team because I still think it's going to be Bergbaum and Brian as the center back partnering. But Brian is 34 years old, and I have a feeling in a couple of years he might be started to fall off the track, and that Donovan Pines will be the perfect replacement for Brian if that time will come. But like I said, I think he could be a very decent defender in this league, and don't be surprised that even if he does not play a lot of game, or if he does just come off the bench, he can make a big impact to this DC United team. Now, in terms of what I like about this team, again, the roster, it looks even better than last season. I mean, one thing that heading into this offseason, with DC just completely getting rid of their attacking core, which I thought a lot of people knew that it was going to happen with, Wayne Rooney announcing that he was going to be leaving DC and going to be going back to England, and then Lucho Acosta looked like he's going to be out, with DC not re-signing him to a new contract, that there was going to be a big problem for DC heading into this season, and that how in the world are they going to replace the goals and replace the attacking threat that Wayne Rooney and Lucho Acosta left with this team? Well, the answer is they got Edison Flores, Yamil Assad, and also Julian Gresso in the offseason. I mean, that clearly just solved the issue that they have in terms of having a real impact playmaker, and because of that, their roster looks even better than last year. I mean, we already know they have a very good defense, but now they have add in some more attacking threat that can definitely make this team score more than 42 goals that they scored last season. Yeah, that just tells you that this roster looks even better than last year, and that it's hard to believe all that fears that it was going to be doom and gloom and that DC might be going through a transitional period where they're going to have to experience the growing pain. That doesn't seem like it's going to happen, and it seemed like the reason why that's not going to happen is the big time acquisition that they have made this offseason, which you also got to give a lot of credit to the front office in terms of this DC team, acknowledging the biggest problem that they had, and they're not afraid to try to address it by spending that money. And DC historically has not been a team that likes to spend a lot of money, but they are definitely one of the many teams right now in the league where you're seeing many of these teams where they were very reluctant to spend money, but recently they are started to spend more money because they're seeing that the league is transitioning into a period where you cannot be just cheap in terms of getting talent, and that sometimes you just gotta have to spend the cash in terms of getting some of the best talent in this league. So one big question that I have with DC has to be what happened when Ola Kamara goes down and who's going to play striker. If there's one position that I think I'm a little bit concerned with DC heading into this season is the striker position, because Ola Kamara is the only striker on this team, and if he does go down with an injury, yeah, somebody's going to have to play out of position, and I'm guessing maybe Edison Flores can play striker, and some other of these playmakers on this DC team can be playing in that number 9 position, or they might go with a false 9 if they don't have a striker to be available for them on the bench. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen if Ola Kamara does get down. And you also kind of wonder, as much as DC has done so well in terms of improving their attack and especially bring all these kind of playmakers, did they bring a little bit too much, and that they also forgot that they need to have a guy that can play in that number 9 position, and that's really the only position that I am a little bit concerned about this team, because they just have no depth whatsoever, and that Ola Kamara is basically the only guy that can be play at that number 9 position and consider his natural position. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and if you're a DC United fan, what do you think of your offseason acquisition? I know a lot of people, and especially a lot of DC fans, are happy with what they have done so far in this offseason. And also, what do you think is going to be the goal scorer, the playmaker, the MVP, and the surprise package in this team? And what do you like about this team heading into this upcoming season? And what is your one big question that you still have with this team as the season begins? But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.